So hello again and welcome back to another segment of Rainbows Are Magnetic. And I'd just like to point out that this suspended rod has been induced with magnetic energy, and so it permanently points to magnetic north. And this one here, the thin one, is the drifter that hasn't been induced with magnetic energy. And earlier on this morning, it was over here, almost pointing to the west. The north pointing end of the drifter, which is a magnetic south attracted to north, was pointing almost to west. The permanent magnet rod was pointing to magnetic north, and it's offset to the right, which is about maybe 7 degrees or so right of true north. And just a point of fact that your GPS is orientated to true north. That's the datum for a GPS on your phone, or a GPS is orientated to true north. So today I'm going to show you some more facts that unanimously prove that there is electrical energy in magnetic energy. Not that I have to, but some places in a Google search are now saying, after the last 7 or 8 years of searching, are now saying that electromagnetic energy does not contain both energies. But oh well, they're allowed to change their mind. That's their opinion, and everybody's allowed their own opinion. So let me show you. It starts with the fact that science actually says, and I'll repeat it now before they change it. Science actually says that the molten magma core of our Earth is rotating, it's spinning. Okay, so I've got tons and tons of things to show you, but today I'm only going to show you a few things really. Pointed out the compass and the drifter this morning. I'll show you a few things on this video, but the first thing I need to point out to you is this fact. I was watching TED TV recently, technical education, something or other, on the TV. Great show. Got a lot to do with science and actual scientists that are talking there. And so this chap said that electromagnetic energy consists of two components, electrical energy and magnetic energy. I know I've banged on about it a lot before, but there's the confirmation. And so what I need to tell you is this, that they also said, I also heard somewhere else, that science believe that the molten magnet core is spinning, is rotating. Well, it's rotating like an electric motor, and that is causing the electrical component by that spinning, just like a generator or an alternator, causing that electrical component to pulse at a frequency out from the core of our Earth. And so what I need to tell you is this, that realizing that the core is an extremely powerful generator or electric motor, and we know that sometimes an electric motor can be a generator. When it's a DC electric motor, it can be turned into a generator. So the core is spinning. It's acting as an electric motor because it is spinning on its own accord. And science tell us that that the frequency of our Earth varies from 8 hertz to around 12 hertz. Well, I'm going to tell you that there are other times when the frequency increases even more, and sometimes even less, due to other planets which also have frequencies of their own, inducing electrical energy into our Earth because they're so large as they drift by, as they orbit past us. So what I'm going to tell you is something that I told you in the book, but I didn't clarify exactly how it was happening in the book. In the book called The Holy Grail of Science by MICK COX, I said that the waves of our ocean are at a set rate. There is a point-to-point distance which is equal on days or sometimes hours in the ocean, and that's because there is a frequency, an energy of possessing a frequency that drives those waves. And yes, you guessed it, it's the core. It's the core of our Earth. Now, I think I've clarified to you. I certainly did clarify to you quite clearly in the book that that the waves on the ocean are at particular point-to-point distances because of the frequency of our Earth that's pulsing and making those waves. So if you can imagine that the core is actually pulsing the frequency out, it's the driving force, or it's the energy source of the frequency of our Earth, which is, of course, the electrical component, and that's got to be alternating current if it possesses a frequency. So that frequency is drumming more or less and vibrating the ocean surface to create waves. I'm going to be telling you more in this video. There's lots and lots more in the book. Of course, I'm going to get around to one day editing the book and adding in the new values and stuff like that. And I'm going to be adding in rainbows into the book, into the very first section of the book, because you really need to comprehend, not fully comprehend, but you need to comprehend quite a lot about rainbows being magnetic before you can really get satisfied with what's in the book. It helps you to connect and relate to some of the things that are in the book, especially the planets, our planets in our solar system that are particular colors. Mars is red. The next one out on the outgoing ascending line is Earth, which is blue, as we know. Neptune is a blue color. The color after that is Saturn, which is yellow, and etc. In earlier videos, I explained that the planets are in two different sets of rainbow colors. And so anyway, the core of our Earth is a generator, and it's also an electric motor which is spinning and rotating. It's generating at the same time that it's generating at the same time that it is an electric motor being driven by the energy. So how is it possible in electrical theory that you can have a generator and an electric motor both at the same time? The generator is DC, the electric motor is AC because it possesses a frequency, and purely because we know that electromagnetic energy possesses two components, two energies that function together as one. It possesses magnetic energy and electrical energy. Well, it is electromagnetic energy. So maybe, just maybe, some of the atoms or whatever, some of the components in the molten magma generate or cause the generating electricity part, and maybe, just maybe, other components, atoms or etc. of a different type create the electrical motor with possessing a frequency, driven by a frequency. So maybe, just maybe, those atoms possess the frequency which creates electricity, the electrical component of electromagnetic energy. So that's what I had to say. let's get back to the actual remainder of the video now. There's quite a few facts in there. I think the video is probably going to be about 55 minutes long, an hour long, and let's get back into it, hey? Good to see you. So what I'd like to point out next is I'm going to step back to a fact that I wrote in the book called The Holy Grail of Science by MICK COX, and I'll have to figure out how to reverse that camera to show you that in proper view. And so in the book I wrote about how in fact our Earth is a north and south magnetic pole. So south magnetic, north magnetic, and of course the equator, where a 12-inch neutral band of energy exists, and every single solitary magnet in the universe has a neutral band of energy. A little tiny bar magnet is too small to be able to measure it, but there's a neutral band, and as we cross the equator, the compass spins around, but on the equator the compass will run sideways. So there's that equator. North is a positive polarity, electrical polarity, and south is a negative polarity. And so what happens is that our Earth rotates in a field. This is our sun here, and that dot is our Earth in the solar system, and that smaller dot next to it, if I was to zoom in, is our moon. Now in the book I told you that there's 4 seasons, 4 king tides, and 4 pairs of neap tides. So in the book I can tell you that if you can imagine our Earth here orbiting around, and at the same time the sun and its 4 lines are rotating and doing a cycle every 4 years, and we of course go the opposite direction, I think it is, in the solar system, or maybe it's the same direction, can't quite remember. Doesn't matter so much about the semantics, but what I need to tell you is that you can see the gap between the lines becoming each season, and if I was to identify the lines with polarities, there's something like this, and there is 2 large lines which make up the spring tide that in Australia they refer to one huge tide that's bigger than all the rest, and it's because the polarity of a particular line, the largest line, is reacting with the negative polarity of our Earth in the southern hemisphere where Australia is. So with the negative and positive, and the lines being negative and positive, I got that back to front, haven't I? So south is negative, and north is positive. So with the lines being positive and negative, and the seasons being the period that we rotate or orbit between the lines, and the Earth being negative and positive polarities, you can see why, a little bit of why we have the seasons, because negative might react with positive to create a winter, and at the same time a positive in the northern polarity in the northern hemisphere will react with the negative to create a summer for them, and the neutral band of energy in the center. So what I want to talk about today is specifically the fact that the fact that cyclones and hurricanes are caused by eddy currents, and those eddy currents are a common factor, a nuisance effect, a common nuisance effect in every electrical circuit, electromagnetic circuit. We talked about that earlier in the video. And so what I'm going to show you here is, which might lead or help science to understand how the nuisance effect of eddy currents occur, which are little vortexes of energy, sometimes big vortexes of energy in the electrical industry. They occur on heat sinks of microelectronics. They occur in high-rise, where the three phases and neutral are in large cables feeding different levels of the building, or anywhere in the industrial area as well. And they occur in high voltage transformers and high voltage reticulation cables, those big towers with cables running through the fields that you see. It happens in the cables and on the insulators. So those eddy currents I talked about they occur as hurricanes in the northern positive polarity when there is a line rolling, when we are rolling through a line of our solar system in, say, the same polarity, and two like poles repel. I really do think I've got a 90% strong thought that the eddy currents occur during a like polarity in the northern hemisphere as hurricanes. And so some people have been wondering how it's possible that cyclones occur in the southern hemisphere, which are about 1,000 times bigger. Well, as I spoke about in the book, we have a sun with rotating magnetic lines as a neighbouring sun, which is 1,000 times bigger than our Earth. And we also have another sun in the other quadrant of our galaxy, which is 100 times bigger. And you'll almost see now how our sun was originally formed, and how every other sun was originally formed in our galaxy. So at one stage, the 1,000 times bigger sun and the 100 times bigger sun didn't meet. The 1,000 times bigger, of course, would have had a longer line, and eventually that the neighbouring sun, 100 times bigger, grew long enough over millions or billions, of course billions of years, and eventually crossed and formed another magnetic pump. Each sun is a magnetic pump, and I found the term magnetic pump in a very old science dictionary in the railway yards at Bowen Hills. Don't all rush to go and grab that dictionary right now. It's probably already gone as of about 10 years ago. So that's how our sun was formed. From the moment the lines crossed, they began attracting gases of helium, which is what the science dictionary said. But most of all, if I can draw our sun in at a later stage within our galaxy, it too, just like every other sun, has four lines spanning from it. And this is more about the book, really, The Holy Grail of Science by Mick Cox, than it is about rainbows. But this is referring to hurricanes and cyclones. So I'm going to draw in our sun as I had it before, and draw in our Earth, which is that dot there, and the moon, a smaller dot, of course. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to identify these lines again as a north positive and south negative. Remember that one of these lines is was originally 1,000 times bigger than the other line. Today we have two spring tides that are very large and two spring tides that are slightly smaller. King tides, sorry. Two king tides that are large and two slightly smaller king tides. The king tides are in pair sizes. Now, in Australia, and I'm going to draw our Earth larger again, and that equator in there, north here and a south here, we'll put the polarities in there again, and realize that the reason why, let's say, for example, these two lines were bigger than the other two lines, just these two here right now, you can realize that the spring tide that we have here in Australia in the southern hemisphere would be reacting more with either a large north positive or a large south negative, because our Earth in the southern hemisphere is negative polarity. So maybe, just maybe, I'm going to take a gamble here, and I'm going to say that the northern hemisphere has their biggest tide of the year, that spring tide in the northern hemisphere. I'm going to take the gamble to say that it's reacting to a different, larger line in our solar system. So I'm going to draw a magnetic pole up here. Let's say this is a north pole of a magnet. Now, in college, they taught us during power generation that every pole has three strongest open circuit lines. Now, the three strongest open circuit lines generate something like 85 or 95% of all electricity in a generator or an alternator, generator being DC electricity, and an alternator being alternating current electricity. I don't have to mention Tesla, how he taught, I think it was James Watt, on how to do power reticulation in cities. James Watt was going to run generators every 200 meters or something to feed the homes, and Tesla said, no, you have to make it alternating current, because alternating current will travel further. And James Watt denied that Tesla had taught him that. Let's not get into the politics. Let's get back to this again. There's three strongest open circuit lines. Now, open circuit lines extend from the pole, and they don't just extend. This is a two-dimensional view that we're looking at. They're like a hairy pole, you know, all over the pole, and in a three-dimensional view of a magnet, every magnet. And there are open circuit lines which return to the opposite pole, and there's lots and lots of those. You remember the diagram that I've shown you a million times, where the magnetic energy goes all the way around the magnet. In our Earth, the ley lines are like wires of a bird cage, which are bird cage because the magnet, when we look at a magnet, we see a two-dimensional view of the closed circuit lines and open circuit lines. When we see that two-dimensional view, remember that the energy goes all the way around the magnet in a spherical design with a bar magnet. It would of course be an elongated spherical design. This is a two-dimensional view, like a cutting through the earth. You'll see that in the original video. Now, of rainbows are magnetic. As I said, this is stuff that is in the book, The Holy Grail of Science, to do with hurricanes and cyclones. So when we orbit through one of the lines, each of the lines, we have a king tide, 4 king tides a year. And because we've got 3 strongest lines being open circuit lines at the pole of every magnet, and this is the magnet right here, then the pole of the magnet right here, then of course the sun has a certainly molten magnetic core, and it's also an electric motor, and all of the planets are electric motors in some huge solar system clock. It's all clockwork, and so is the galaxy, etc. Now, because of these 3 strongest lines at every pole, the center line being the strongest, and this diagram of our sun is depicting just those center lines, let me tell you that when our Earth orbits through one of the lines, or when it orbits between the lines, we experience a season. And because of the polarities of our Earth, north and south, it determines whether we have a winter or summer in each hemisphere. So when we orbit through one of the lines, especially the center strongest line, we have a king tide. But with every king tide, there are 2 other lines which generate the neap tides. A neap tide occurs before and after the king tide, and it's all in association with those 3 strongest lines. It's all in the book, but this is just a little bit of a reference to the book. Now, what I discovered was that we suffer the smaller atmospheric vortexes called hurricanes in the north in a particular area, because remember that it's timely, and these long lines that span from the sun will point in a pattern on the earth. I don't think that Hurricane Alley in America is caused by an extremely huge amount of magnetic material in that area, and science would be able to confirm that because I'm sure they did tests. I'm telling you that it happens in Hurricane Alley in America because there's a pattern to the lines pointing onto the earth, and at a point where it's most reactive with the north polarity in the northern hemisphere. I could be wrong about that. There could be an especially strong or huge amount of denser magnetic energy in Hurricane Alley in America, but I think science would be able to do a study that Hurricane Alley is always on the move. It's because of this timely clock of our solar system and our Earth being involved in these lines, causing hurricanes, eddy currents. I can tell you that the Hurricane Alley in America would be on the move. It would be up here at the moment, and then over here later on. It must be moving throughout America and maybe throughout the world in different places due to the timely pointing of these lines on our Earth. So where do the cyclones come from? Now, I just mentioned, I think, that Hurricane Ali in the northern hemisphere as a positive polarity is reacting with a northern hemisphere largest line in our solar system, which is the strongest positive polarity, and like poles repel to cause those vortexes of magnetic energy known on our Earth as hurricanes. So I think the Earth reacts with the strongest or largest magnetic line, which originally came from the 1,000 sized neighbouring Earth, and still exists today in two different sizes, in pairs of size. And I think it's because that the electrical component of the electromagnetic energy, primarily seen as magnetic energy in these lines, the electrical component of the electromagnetic energy reacts with the electromagnetic energy of our Earth. And it could be because this line in the area of Hurricane Ali is in resonant frequency, maybe with the Earth in that place, in that area. And as I say, Hurricane Ali must be on the move, and science should be able to say Hurricane Ali existed over here in Europe 50 billion years ago or whatever. No, it couldn't be, because the Earth only formed 4.5 billion years ago or something. Anyhow, doesn't matter. It should have been, maybe 1 million years ago, Hurricane Ali was in a different area of stuff. They should be able to prove that by splinters of wood or whatever that are in the ground, or lots of broken trees or something, in various stages or periods of our Earth in different areas. So what I'm going to tell you is that cyclones, which are 1,000 times bigger, and you might have seen it by now already, are generated by the sun, the neighbouring sun, which is 1,000 times bigger, when its lines come in and point at our southern hemisphere. The neighbouring sun, of course, would have to be in a south negative polarity to react with the southern hemisphere of our Earth, which is in a south negative electrical polarity. That's a little bit of evidence of how hurricanes in the north and cyclones in the south occur. We are starting to have hurricanes in the south. There was one not far from here recently in Mount Tamborine, and I saw somebody who posted a photo of it. It was absolutely positively a tight, small vortex as a hurricane up there in Mount Tamborine. And Mount Tamborine would, of course, have a lot of magnetic energy up there, being a mountain. A lot more than here on the plains or close to the ocean, etc., where I am, closer to the coastal line. So that's how the cyclones occur. Now I'm going to just quickly, instead of switching off the video, I'll put something up there right now which explains how I wrote it in the book, how in the early days when our Earth was first formed, and remember there's 4 metallic planets, there's 4 giant gas planets, and early science only discovered with glass telescopes, early science only discovered 4 dwarf planets in those days, which are the largest dwarf planets today, having discovered more dwarf planets with electronic telescopes. So what I'm going to show you right now is that our sun originally had stronger magnetic energy in the lines that formed all of the planets. Yes, I said in the book, it describes it in simple terms on the front cover, how our planets, 4 metallic planets, 4 large gas planets, and 4 larger dwarf planets are in our solar system. Nowadays, there's 11 or 16 or so dwarf planets with electronic telescopes that they've discovered, and a lot of those dwarf planets orbit in and out of the solar system, the neighbouring solar system, and back and forth from ours, I think, is what I read one day or heard one day. So, okay, what I'm going to say, this leads to the actual fact, what I wanted to tell you today, and what this fact is remember that our sun generates the hurricanes, mostly in Hurricane Alley in the north. There are other hurricanes that occur, or they call them typhoons, in Japan and stuff like that. And they call them typhoons because the Japanese, my guess is, they like to be a little bit different in identifying those hurricanes do belong to them, so they call them typhoons. And typhoons and hurricanes that all occur in the northern hemisphere spin the same direction, and cyclones in the south spin the opposite direction, of course, due to being an opposite polarity reacting with the same polarity coming from the 1,000 times bigger sun. So in the book, I describe how it's a regular event for hurricanes. This is a poor depiction of Australia. Here I am standing here. I'll draw me in as a little stick man. Here in close to 35 k's south of Brisbane, and Brisbane being there. So Rockhampton is up here, about 650 k's, and Rockhampton is about where the cyclones generally, often come to. And they often start 1,000 kilometres out to sea. I think it's around the Canary Islands or something like that, and they come in. And because they always start in the same place, usually start in the same place, that's a strong indicator that it's to do with a timely event. And so what I tell you is that when they're out to sea in the open ocean, they're not as strong as when they come to the coastal line. And what happens is that usually at night time, the cyclone, which is 1,000 times bigger, will drift out to sea and get a bit weaker. But sometimes they keep the momentum and stay close to the coast. And what I described in the book is that places like the gorges of Petra and the city of Petra, which is within a sandstone mountainous region, the gorges of Petra are only, say, 6 foot wide gorges that are carved through the sandstone mountains. Those gorges were carved into the earth in the early days when the lines from our solar system had a denser magnetic energy, denser meaning stronger magnetic energy, and pulsing, and they carved the gorges and other gorges and craters like Lake Eyre into the earth, and sucked out the molten magma in places like Uraloo here in Australia, Ayers Rock, which is 500 k's south of Lake Eyre. Lake Eyre is an indent, and I said that the gorges, the sandstone gorges of Petra, about 8 feet wide, were carved into those mountains by the lines spanning from our sun in the early days when they were stronger and a lot more powerful. Maybe they had a higher component of electrical energy in them. Well, from South Australia all the way up through to Lake Eyre is an indent, a groove in our Australian continent. They call it Cooper's Creek. Cooper's Creek doesn't flood that often, but what I want to tell you is that that Cooper's Creek travels all that way and it floods. I think somebody said every 200 years or something, but it floods a lot more often than that. And Cooper's Creek can be up to 140 kilometres or miles wide when it floods, but generally around about a 70 kilometre wide groove or gutter into our Australian continent, caused by one of the lines, of course, is what I'm inferring. And so I'll jump back now to cyclones, and cyclones start in Australia, start about 1,000 kilometres out to sea, around the Canary Islands or something like that, and then they move across to the coastal line where they intensify, and they intensify because of the magnetic energy that's in the continent, and they don't move to maybe a stronger area of magnetic energy because they're so timely, like Hurricane Alley in America, the original lines carved out what I call the tennis ball patterns of continents on our Earth. And the evidence that they carved out the continents into their shapes is the fact that the magnetic lines point onto our Earth in places like Australia today, cause cyclones, and they drift out to sea. So maybe, just maybe, when our sun is shining on the Earth, that one of the neighbouring suns, maybe it comes from a different quadrant of our solar system. Maybe down there it's 100,000 times bigger. I don't know. But those cyclones point onto our Earth. It's not necessarily coming from 1,000 times bigger sun there in that quadrant. Maybe it's coming from 1,000 times bigger in another quadrant. Maybe there's 1,000 times bigger here, 1,000 times bigger here, 100 times bigger there, and 100 times bigger there. Maybe. So what I'm telling you is, during the day, they follow the coastline because in the early days, they carved out the continents, especially as Australia. Very seldom we get them in the Gulf of Carpentaria, and this is Australia there. Very seldom we get them in the Gulf of Carpentaria, but they definitely follow the coastline. And nowadays they only come as far south as around about Rockhampton before they fizzle out. Now, what I want to tell you is that the reason why they fizzle out when they go out to sea is because the ocean, the line nowadays isn't strong enough to carve out the continent anymore. It's only strong enough to cause a large eddy current as a cyclone. And when they drift out to sea, because the ocean is so deep that the density of the ocean electrolyte diffuses the energy and it can't reach, the line can't reach the magnetic seabed. So that's what I had to tell you. So let's reiterate that, that cyclones fizzle out or get weaker when they're following the coastline. Sometimes they drift out to sea and come back in and stuff like that. And they fizzle out, they get weaker. The intensity of the cyclone always reduces when it goes out to sea, and it's due to the depth of the sea's electrolytes not being able to react with the magnetic earth of the continent itself. I think that the continental shelf which is about 200 kilometres out to sea in Australia. Science might be able to tell us that cyclones change in some form when they get to the continental shelf. And the continental shelf, if this was the coastline, the continental shelf goes like this and then suddenly drops off and goes really deep. So what I'm saying is it could be a high intensity category when it's following the coastline. It could dwindle off to a slightly lesser category when it's over this area before the continental shelf, and then it could suddenly drop off to a far lesser category of cyclone when it hits the continental shelf and drops off to a deeper ocean where there's more electrolytes and deeper to get through. Maybe all the crustaceans or whatever it's there as well, maybe they add to it, and the line can't get to the seabed as easily as it does closer to the coast. So the lines, the original lines carved out the gorges of the city of Petra, where the city of Petra is and stuff, the sandstone gorges of Petra, and it also carved out the continents. Maybe, just maybe, the continents were carved out when Gondwana land first broke apart, and then maybe later on, when the lines became a bit weaker, they carved out the gorges of Petra and other gorges that are there as well. The Grand Canyon gorges are a lot wider than the gorges of Petra, and that's because maybe our sun carved out those gorges of Petra with intense narrow lines, and maybe the neighbouring sun, 1,000 times bigger, carved out places like the Grand Canyon, which are a lot larger. I think I wrote all of that in the book, again, called The Holy Grail of Science, by MICK COX. And on the front cover there it says 4 king tides, 4 seasons, 4 metallic planets, 4 giant gas planets, and 4 dwarf planets, and 4 pairs of neap tides, etc., on the front cover. It's quite an exciting book. It's got about 150 to 200 theories, or I call them facts because they are a fact in my mind. Facts of nature in the book described about the lines and etc. So I think it's bye for now till I make another edition of this video, and this video is it's all about how our solar system and the planets were formed by electromagnetic lines from our sun and electromagnetic lines from neighbouring suns. So just one last fact I want to tell you is a video. I want to tell you about a video that I mentioned in the book. It's a video done by a Scotsman, and what he did was he dropped a magnet into a glass of water and put it in the freezer overnight, and discovered small tubes, very small tubes of frozen ice projecting from the poles where the open circuit strongest lines are. I think the closed circuit lines are about 10% compared to the open circuit lines, which are around about 90 or 95% of density, magnetic density. So the Scotsman said that he's Scotch glass, and it wasn't filled with Scotch, which is really peculiar for a Scotsman. It was filled with water, a circular magnet put in there, I think it was, and small tubes of frozen ice were revealed in the morning. Well, what I'm going to tell you is that our sun, with those 4 magnetic lines, this is written in the book, those lines that span from our sun are very obviously discovered by that Scotsman to be tubular. and those tubular lines formed tubular planets on them. So 4 metallic planets and 4 giant gas planets, because the tubes go out into sort of like, if we were to take a 2-dimensional cutting through there and view half the tube, you would see the tubes going out in sort of a V shape, and that's why the planets further out in the orbit, the large gas planets, were formed in a larger were formed as larger planets because the tubes went out in a V fashion. Now, to point out that our sun, our solar system, was formed by 100-size sun, neighbouring sun, and 1,000 times bigger neighbouring sun, which crossed over and formed our sun initially as a magnetic pump. All suns, solar systems, all stars are magnetic pumps. Magnetic pumps attract gases of helium, primarily helium, 98% helium, and every sun is burning that helium at a phenomenal rate of combustion, and that's why we don't know where the source of helium atoms are coming from, but because they're being burned at such a phenomenal rate, that causes the vacuum of space. So, as I said, different polarities cause different seasons on our Earth, reacting with different polarities of our Earth. Now, the 4 metallic planets exist in 2 different sizes. There are 2 metallic small planets, and there are 2 metallic large planets. Earth is one of the larger ones, and in the ascending line of planets, I don't quite know why, but in the ascending line of planets, there is the when I say the ascending line of planets, I'm talking about the planets, if we were to put them in a line, how they ascend from the sun. So our sun is there, and the first planet is Mercury, and it's smaller. I'm going to exaggerate here, but the next planet is Venus, and it's larger. The next planet is Earth, and it's larger. And then the next planet is Mars, which is smaller. And of course, I'm implying that Mercury and Mars were formed by a smaller 100-size line on the 100-size line, and exaggerated. I'll put them in straight lines now, which is what happened in the early days. The 100-size line would have been smaller, and Mercury and Mars formed on those lines. And so on the larger lines, we had Earth and Venus formed. And in the ascending line, we have 2 large giant gas, 2 smaller giant gas, and I don't properly understand why in the ascending line that there's a small, a large, small, then a large, and a smaller, large gas planets. I don't quite understand that, but it doesn't matter. We don't have to understand all the semantics for now. There's enough facts in there. Our needles, the permanent magnet is still facing magnetic north. Now the drifter coat hanger wire is now at the permanent magnet needle is at about 7 degrees right of true north, and the drifter is at about 10 degrees left of true north right now. You would have noticed the changing during the video. So there's lots more I could tell you. There's lots more in the book. I got my fingers crossed that it was fairly well described in the book, because here's a miracle for you if you want to see another miracle, is the fact that all my life I was dyslexic, extremely dyslexic, and my partner can tell you that some days nowadays, while I'm not so bad, after having written a book, I've knocked down the walls of my dyslexia. And some days on a bad day, maybe too many coffees and too much psychic energy caused by magnetic planets drifting past, maybe causes me to not be able to read a sign with 6-inch letters 6 inches tall. I have to stop and think and think and think, reading the sign over and over again. Hey, it actually says ladies apparel or ladies dresses on floor 2 or something. That happened in the shopping centre. It really made me aware of my dyslexia. So being dyslexic, extremely dyslexic, I had never read a book. I tell a lie, I read the Brer Rabbit books when I was a kid, under the blankets, with a torch when I was a kid. And in those days, torches didn't last very long and they got quite dim. And so they told me that I needed glasses. And I needed glasses because I was reading books. I didn't want to wear the glasses, so I stopped reading books. And I think maybe that's where my dyslexia came from. I'm not sure. But anyhow, never written a book, never read a book, never read an actual. Oh, I did have a go at reading a book called Black Elk Speaks. And I can't remember too many things out of it. So it was an extremely interesting book. Oh, and I have read a book called The Sacred Path Medicine Cards, our medicine card book as well. So American Indian stuff. And as life has progressed, believe it or not, Facebook helped me to read a lot too. Facebook helped me to read enough so that I could edit my book called The Holy Grail of Science by MICK COX. But the book was more or less already written in gobbledygook. I had it here at home on 4 different old laptops that have disappeared out of the house. Isn't that strange? Along with some photos of a particular person and some other things on various occasions, including my underwear. Yeah, they stole my underwear. I hope they're not wearing them on the head. I wouldn't like anything weird like that to do with my underwear. Anyhow, let's get back to this. So yeah, here's your miracle. I wrote a book. It is the most incredible book that's been written for quite a while. And a lot of you won't agree. You know, a lot of you flat earthers and people like that won't agree that the book's incredible. A lot of you won't agree that rainbows are magnetic. The discovery or the rediscovery of rainbows is incredible, especially those that are making money from science will have to disagree with me so that everyone listens to their theories, of course. The finances or politics of finance in science. Oh well, if you want to learn about science, from what I've learnt, is you want to look into old science more than new science. An example of that is the fact that the dwarf planets were discovered as dwarf planets through glass telescopes. They then invented electronic telescopes, and they were no longer dwarf planets. They became satellites or meteors or something that were orbiting, like some of the other meteors that orbit. And then somebody else was retiring and made a huge statement that they are dwarf planets, and then they went back to satellites or meteorites, and now I think they're dwarf planets again. I'm not sure, but I can guarantee you they're dwarf planets. I describe how they were formed in the book, with our sun and those tubular, if I can draw one of the magnetic lines in a tubular form, Well, there's tubes inside tubes inside tubes, and that's how the planets were formed in different sizes. Anyhow, that's enough for today. Hope you've had a lovely weekend, because it's Sunday today, Sunday morning actually, 5 to 6 right now. And this video is, I can't see the time. Oh, there we are, 53 minutes. So have a great Sunday, folks. It's going to be a good day. Bye for now.